About not, the main point in the conversation was about not allowing the other students, students of other departments to avail of the scholarship. Which was missing in your answer?
I had to talk about the only eligibility for romance.
No, you had to talk about the others, but what was the main focus should have been, what was the student talking about in the conversation? So the student's focus in the conversation was the other, it was not, your focus in all the integrated tasks has to be on the conversation or lecture.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So if it is a conversation, then your focus should be the conversation and all the points from the conversation.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
And I'll go through the others and I'll give you a detailed analysis of all the tasks, okay?
Okay, ma'am.
And
yeah?
Yes, Varshini?
Ma'am, if I'm going to summarize the passage, how much time should I allot for that?
Not more than 10 seconds.
So like if I'm summarizing the passage and I'm saying it out, I should not spend more than 10 seconds for it.
Yeah. So from the passage, you just get the main point, what the passage is about. Say, in this case, the university has announced some new rules for the scholarship, the Romance language scholarship, and which includes submitting essays and not allowing not allowing students of other departments for the scholarship. Yeah.
Yes.
You can put it in your own words. So that's what I think, as far as I remember. And then you go on to the conversation, and you should get the details of what the opinion of the student is and the reasons for the opinion.
Okay.
Right? So focus will be on the conversation, and in case of the lecture with the integrated task, your focus will be on the lecture, right? Because if the question, if you read the question, the questions will also be focused on the lecture.
Okay.
Right? Okay, who else in? This is Sahas. Sahas, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you just send me your...
sorry to disturb you. Why they are everyone is putting off the camera?
Yeah, everyone has camera off.
They are a small kid or what? I can't understand. First only I have warned everyone. If you have any problem, put in the chat box.
Okay, everyone, please have your cameras on.
Why they are irritating every time? I don't know.
Ma'am, actually, I'm going back to my house from my class. I'll turn on my camera once I reach home. I'll reach in 30 minutes or so.
30 minutes?
Yeah,
hello, you are... How are you traveling?
Ma'am, by train.
By train? Doesn't matter. You can have your camera on in the train also. Okay, Charles, I'll go through your responses. I think you just sent me. So I haven't been able to go through all of them. I will give you your feedback. Anybody else who has practiced? Ayan? Anything? Ayan, are you there? See, if your cameras are not on, we can't figure out whether you are there or not, and you are not even responding. Manya? Good afternoon, Manya. Are you there? Ayan, Manya.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, if they are not responding, I will just shift them in waiting room. If they are not.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
She just put logging and she's going anywhere. Every time.
I want everyone's camera on so that we can interact. You surely won't want me to put my camera off and talk to you. Neither do I want you to put your camera off and talk to me.
I'm ready to call me. Actually, I'm having a lot of network issues over here, so I won't
hear. Where are you?
Varshini.
I'm at my house, but my Wi-Fi isn't working properly, so I'm connected to my mobile data. And it's fast.
Don't put off your camera. Every time you're putting off your camera, I will not tolerate.
Even if we are online, we would love to interact with our cameras on, right? Yes, Manya, are you facing an issue?
No, ma'am, not anymore. I had some problem with network.
मान्या, आपका कैमरा बिल्कुल बंद नहीं होना चाहिए अभी. आपका हमेशा का इशू है कैमरे का.
Akshita, have you been able to go through the portions you missed out on?
No, ma'am. I asked ma'am about the extra lecture, and she sent me a link. So I filled out the forms, and they said that they'll arrange it. They'll call my parents, and then they'll even talk to, and then they'll arrange the lecture.
And in the meantime, I think you have access to the videos, classroom videos. You can ask ma'am for the link. There's a link given in your group also. Just see where you can find the videos and go through the videos.
Yes, ma'am.
So because it's a very short time we have, it may or may not be possible to have an extra lecture, but still we will try. Later on, we can have one doubt solving lecture. So at least go through the portion that you have missed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, Nihit, have you been able to go through what you missed?
No, actually, I will try to do it as soon as possible. I haven't done it yet.
You haven't done it as yet. Okay. So anyone else practiced? Tanush? Have you been able to record anything?
No, I'm not really.
No, not really. So when are you going to practice? See, this is not going to be a last moment job. It's not like you just mug up the answer and you are done with it, right? So you cannot improve unless you practice. And remember, sectional scores are also important. So, you can't say that, okay, I'll get 30 on 30 in reading and listening, and writing and speaking, I'll just get through with it, I'll get 100. That's not going to work. Yeah, you'll miss out on some good universities if you don't get 25 in each section. And speaking, very likely, if you don't practice properly, if you don't have the format of your answers strong enough, proper, you may lose out. Right? This is for everybody. Whoever has not been practicing. Celeb, have you checked your audio? Sorry, Celeb, we cannot hear you. Please make sure your audio is working so that we can hear you. If you cannot respond, then we don't know how your responses are. Please check your audio. So from whatever we did last time, how many of you have done the homework that I told you to do? This was the task that you had. Yeah. Read the following text from a college course manual and listen to the conversation that follows. This was one of them. Assessment procedure group work. This you had to do last. This was the task for your homework for task 2. And I had given you a homework for task 3 also. That was about VAC theory. Anybody did it? How many people did it? I think 1 or 2 of you. Who give me the response? Charles, you have was that included in your response?
Yes. Give you back theory.
The one about VAC theory, how many did it? Please raise your hands so I know how many of you have done it. No one? Still sitting comfortably, not doing anything. What happened? Manya, Ayan, no responses. Yaksh, okay, Yaksh, you have done it. Yaksh, you haven't sent me any of the integrated ones as yet.
No, I haven't sent it. I'll send you.
Okay, you can send it to me. Sahas, I think you have sent me. I haven't gone through it.
Yes, ma'am.
Tanush, what about you? Tanush, can you hear me? Yes, Tanush. At least this one as is a homework you would have done.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you done this?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have your response with you? Have you recorded?
No, ma'am.
So how can you say you have done it? Anything, any of the tasks you do, please record yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Is anybody ready with the response to this? Anybody else recorded? Akshita?
Ma'am, I didn't know the homework, so I haven't done it. Ma'am, I was absent last class.
Last class you weren't there?
No, ma'am.
Okay, if you're so... last class you weren't there. Okay, anyway. We'll do one thing. We'll do this together because I know none of you are going to do it if I give it for homework. We are going to discuss it and you people are going to record and send it to me. Or do you want to do it yourself? I wanted to see whether you can get the points on your own. That was the purpose of giving you the homework. Very disappointing. Okay, we'll do one thing. We'll leave it for homework and I want the responses by tomorrow morning. Right? Every one of you, I want the response to the homework questions by tomorrow morning, along with at least 2 of the integrated of the independent task questions. Right?
Yes.
because we don't want to be wasting time and not finishing the course. Okay, now coming to task number 4. Okay, first tell me, we'll just go through what task number 1, 2, and 3 were. Will tell me. Sahas?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me what task number 2 was? Speaking integrated task 2. What is it about? Just tell me whether it is reading, reads, listen, speak, or and what type of listen.
Read, listen, speak.
Listening to what? Conversation or lecture?
Was a
conversation. Right? And okay, so what is the reading in task number 2 about? Manya, any idea? Manya?
Yes, ma'am.
Any idea what task number 2 is about?
No, ma'am.
No? Have you have your study material? Have you got your study material, Manya?
Yes, ma'am.
So please, if you've got the textbook, as the PDF is with the tracks are also available on the group. I've shared the link. So please download it along with the tracks. Go through the last section, that is section 5 guidelines, and what the speaking tasks are about in the speaking section. So before coming to class, you should have the idea. If you missed out on something, you should go through what you have missed out on. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who will tell me? Salim?
Where can I get the tracks for the listening section?
The tracks have been shared in the link, which has been shared in the group.
Okay.
So you can go through the messages in the group. There's a study material shared in the group. You'll get one folder which has 3 folders inside it: the tracks for the listening section, speaking section, and writing section. All of them are there. Okay, Tanush, can you tell me what task number 3 is?
Ma'am, integrated.
Integrated, of course, but what is it?
Writing.
Remember, I told you you should remember what the tasks are. Task number 3.
Writing.
What writing? We are not talking about writing. We are talking about the speaking section. Task number 3, speaking section. We did it last time.
I wasn't there in the last class.
You were not there in the last class, so you didn't bother to figure out what you missed. Who can tell me? Varshini, what is task number 3?
Ma'am, it's a academic course related, where you read a passage, read a short text, and then you listen to a conversation on the elaboration of the same topic.
Okay. So in task number 3, when you're talking about the reading passage, what is the format of the reading passage? Anybody? Nidhini, what is the format of the reading passage for task number 3? Any idea? Or you were not there last time?
No, ma'am, I was
there. You were there. Of course you were there. Right. So tell me, what is the format of the reading passage for task number 3? What points do you get down from it?
Ma'am, the introduction, like the topic first, what that passage is about.
And then the main topic, like the introduction and conclusion. Not really sure about the passage.
Not conclusion, 2 points maybe. Right? And what do you get from the lecture?
So, ma'am, from the lecture, we write the 2 examples discussed by the professor and then followed by the details for each one. And then if we get time, we summarize them.
No, I just asked what are the points you get down from the lecture? If you're supposed to take notes from the lecture, what do you expect to take notes on?
So the first example followed by its details or explanation, and then the second example and the details.
Right. So what is the structure of your response then? Who will tell me? SARS? Okay, SARS, I think. Is it okay? I think your voice is breaking. Fine. Who else will tell me? Nihat, you were there last time. You can tell me what is the structure of the response?
There's the introduction, then
what will go into your introduction?
So like the broad idea of the passage, and followed by examples.
So what do you, 1 minute, what do you mean by broad idea of the passage?
Like the summary, you can or exactly like about what the passage is about.
What the concept is.
Yeah.
Yeah, what the concept is. If there's any detail of the concept, then or 2 parts of the concept, in brief, that goes in.
Yeah.
Then what do you do?
Then it is followed by examples. 2 to 3 examples.
So, example 1 from the lecture.
Yeah.
Example 1, how it explains the concept. Example 2, how it explains the concept. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone clear about what task number 3 was? Or do you still have any problem? No? Oh. So today we'll move on to speaking task 4. Now, speaking task 4 is, as I say, integrated speaking. But here we don't have anything to read. Right? So speaking task 4 will be just listen and speak. So you listen to a lecture. The lecture here will be longer than the lecture in task number 3. It will be a little more complicated. So you have to focus on taking down the points. So now what we are going to do is we are going to first figure out what the format of the lecture will be. Yeah. So the lecture will be about 1 to 1.5 minutes. It's mostly 90 seconds or 120 seconds. 1.5 minutes usually it will be. Sometimes 2 minutes also. So this will be a lecture or maybe an excerpt from a lecture. It will be about a concept and it will give you some concrete examples to explain the concept. Right? Say the lectures in the listening section where you had a concept, then it could be also come up with a sub-concept. So when you talk about the concept and concrete examples, usually it will be 2 or it could also be 3 sometimes to illustrate the term of the concept. This is what you have to remember. So you will get so when you take down the notes, you know, your format should have the concept, example 1, explanation, then example 2, explanation. This is what you expect from when you talk about task number 4, no matter what lecture comes up, this will be more or less the format of the lecture, right? It could be example 1 and 2, or it could be divided into sub-concepts. Yeah, so it could be point 1 and point 2 of the concept, followed by examples to explain it. So whatever comes up, you know that 2 main points you will get. And the question asks you to summarize the lecture and demonstrate an understanding of the relationship between the examples and overall topic. So after summarizing the lecture, the question could ask you to focus on any one part or explain how or show how the lecturer explains maybe a sub-concept with the help of examples, or how does the lecturer explain the concept with examples? Anything. So more or less, you have to summarize the lecture with focus on what the concept, what question is asking. Here you get 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to respond. Clear? You should know what the task is before you even get to do it. So academic course, topic, summary. That is what it is. So you listen to a lecture, summarize it, format of the lecture you know, you have a concept, 2 or 3 examples, or the concept and 2 parts of the concept, right? Now the topics, if you talk about, could be anything from social science, life sciences, natural sciences, anthropology, business, marketing, economics, just about anything. And your answers will be based on only the information in the lecture. No prior knowledge is required. You only have to analyze and take the main points from the lecture, right? So as I said, the professor will define a concept, emphasize a problem or introduce a phenomena in the beginning, and discuss some important aspects and features, right? And it will have examples to explain the key ideas. Okay. Now, when you say examples, remember one thing. Varshini, this is what I found. This is one point that I found in your responses. When you talk about examples, would you say they with the examples explain or the examples illustrate? I'd spoken about this last time also. When you say examples, the lecturer uses examples to illustrate the point, right? And another thing in your answers, when you are speaking, avoid using the word following, right? Following 2 examples of following 2 points. Following you would use only when you are writing, not when you are speaking. Okay? So don't use the word following in your answers. Just say the lecturer brings up 2 points or gives 2 examples and then go on to explain. Following is not required.
Yes.
Okay? So here, what are you going to do? First thing, you have to take down the notes of the examples and key ideas. So your example should be there in your notes. The key ideas should be there in your notes. And again, we would be going in for a template, yeah, to structure our answer properly. So what is the type of template that we can have? Now remember, it is about summarizing a concept or idea and discussing a particular concept or idea that the lecturer is talking about. So in the lecture, the professor talks about X would be the concept. Yeah. He or she then gives. So you can say once you have said the lecturer or the professor, you can continue with he or she according to whether it is a male professor speaking or a female professor speaking. Gives 2 or 3 examples to illustrate this concept, depends upon whether it is 2 or 3, right? So I can say the lecturer talks about, say, say VAC theory, she gives 2 examples to illustrate the concept, right? Then you go on, or you can say the professor discusses dash in the lecture, giving 2 or 3 examples. Throughout the lecture, the professor talks about dash and how it, you can use that also, but I think this would be the easiest and the simplest way of expressing or beginning your answer. Yeah, the professor discusses whatever the topic is in the lecture, giving 2 examples, right? Next, what do? You have to summarize the main points of the lecture. Now remember, the lecture is of about, if the lecture is about 2 minutes, you can't talk for 2 minutes. So you have to get the main points. Now when you are writing down, you just write down the keywords. Then when you are formulating your sentences, use those keywords to get your sentences, and obviously you'll be paraphrasing the lecture. So you won't be speaking for 2 minutes, you'll be speaking for only 1 minute. Yeah. And of course, getting the important details is important. So that's where the major part of your score lies. So when you come to the first point of first detail, first the professor focuses on dash. This means, and so the explanation you can give, right? Or first the professor talks about whatever. So essentially what the professor is saying that, or the first example, if the professor begins with a clear example in the first point, the first example the professor gives is, and then it goes on to say, she explains, or to be specific, she explains that, or he explains that, right? Similarly, you go on to the second point. Now your first point and second point should be clear. Yeah, you can say the professor also talks about, or another example. If it is a first example given, you will continue with another example. If you have said first the professor talks about, then you will go on to the next point the professor makes is that, or the professor also explains that, right? So first and second, those transition words should be there. Or firstly, the professor says, first example. So if the professor is giving example, your answer should have the word example. If the professor is just giving a point, your answer should have the point. Okay? So the template is clear? Now, when you are answering, what are the things you keep in mind? So first thing is, you have to check what the prompt is. And you have to answer your prompt exactly. Now, the question that you get may not ask you all the points in the lecture. Maybe only part of the lecture. Or maybe you get a question, how does the professor show the changes that have taken place in the recent years? Maybe the professor in the lecture begins with changes that have taken place earlier and then talks about changes in the recent years. So you don't focus. You can just mention the changes earlier, but your main focus throughout the answer will be changes in the recent years, right? So you have to be careful of the key words. So when you get to a question, write down the keyword. So, yeah. So whether if it is a focus on only a part of it, you're not summarizing the entire lecture. So remember, they're going to see whether you have answered the question properly or not. So answer the question and see whether you have answered only what the question is asking you to do, right? And your own opinion or own reasons, again, are not required. Whatever you say is directly only from the points raised in the lecture. So if there are 2 points, you have to give the 2 points. If there are 3 points, you go on with the 3 points. Now, if I say stick to simple, easy to remember words, this is where your templates come in. First thing, how to begin. Don't get stuck on how to begin. And if you say, now remember, they are going to mark you on organization. So what does that mean? Your answer is well organized. How do you organize your answer? Number one, use a template. Number two, remember points, examples, explanation. So point, example, explanation. You have to see this is there, right? So you must have an introduction, maybe point number one, point number two. Conclusion, if you have time, you go into a conclusion, otherwise no. So here taking your notes would be very important, and most important information should be included in your answer. If you are missing on the important information, you will not get your points. Okay. And when you are speaking, remember you are not writing down entire sentences in your notes. So it should not be like you are reading out your notes. You are thinking, you're formulating your answer. You don't need to use very difficult words, but your sentence structure should be correct. Okay. So now coming back to the template, you can write down a template before we move on. So you know this is the template I'm going to use for my response. So the lecture is about, or the professor uses to, either it is what it is about. So if it is just the points, and uses two examples to demonstrate. Yeah. So this is the first sentence, second sentence. Or you can alternately, you can say, the lecturer explains whatever the term is by giving two examples. Or if it is one example, you say an example, right? So this is the first part. Second part, in the first example, or first, he or she describes. Any of them you can use. Third part, in the second example, if you are saying in the first example, if you use that in the first point, then in the second example. If you have used first she says or describes and then second she mentions, you don't go on to say second she describes. Use a different word, right? And don't always say the lecturer says. Don't use that. Mentions, describes, points out, right? And if you have time enough, put in a conclusion in summary, or these examples demonstrate that. Okay? Everyone written down the template? Chinmay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Celeb, have you been able to fix your audio? No? Or you have a major problem, you haven't fixed it all this time. Okay. So everyone got the template down? Who hasn't? Nihit? Written the template? So when I ask you to respond, I want the template to be used. Right? Okay. So now when we are saying that you have, your answer shouldn't seem repetitive. So transitional phrases, if you have, you can say first of all, for example, and last you can say in conclusion. If you have a contrast coming in, what do you use? However, right? Introductory, so introduction to the, when you come to the second example, also in addition, not to mention that you can use, not necessarily, moreover, plus, and conclusion would be consequently, or therefore. right? Remember, just remember one or two of these transition words. So what word would you use in the first point? When you are moving to the second point, what is the corresponding word that can go in? You have to keep in mind, right? And that's where practice comes in. So just a recap of what we spoke all this time about our template, our strategy. So first thing, your note structure is important. So how do here we are not required to do 2 columns maybe, because it's just a lecture. We don't have a reading and a conversation, or reading plus reading plus lecture. So just the point, what is it about? That is the topic, right? So you write down your topic. Then you know it is point 1, example. Then leave some space, point 2, example. And then the explanation, as the lecture goes on, you can write the explanation, right? Then you are going to use the examples and points from the lecture. Follow a template, which is important. Transitional phrases, which are important. How many transition phrases have you used? Yeah. And yes, this is important. Think and speak like a teacher. Like you are explaining, you have read something and you have to explain that lesson to somebody, right? Maybe you are a teacher, you are explaining it to your student. How would you explain it? So if you keep that in mind, it will be easier for you to formulate your answer. So this is how your notes format. We discussed that. Topic, definition, that is the explanation of the topic. Example 1 details, example 2 details. Done? So maybe if there are 2 concepts talked about or 2 examples, say we have example 1, example 2, to help you write better, maybe you can put it in 2 columns or one after the other. Say, and just the keywords down. Say when you're talking about spookfish, just tube fish, eyes hunt, total dark, eyes always upward, swim up to catch, sea rally small, and only you know what you've written. So F could be in fish. Then example, lanternfish, make light, catch prey, escape predator, or little organ. Jen, I don't know. This is not what I've written, so I don't know. Light. So just the keywords. Since you have written it, you know what you've written, right? Now, how do you use the 60 seconds to speak? So first, introduction 10 seconds, not more than that. First example, say the next, say about 20 seconds or so. Yeah. So 18 to 20 seconds would be the example. Again, 18 to 20 seconds. So 18 seconds, if you finish, you have a little time, about 4 seconds for the conclusion. If you don't have time for the conclusion, absolutely fine. What do you have to remember? You've got to finish your response in 58 seconds. So 58 seconds can go on to 59 seconds. If it goes beyond 60 seconds, that part of the answer will not be recorded. Okay, so it will sound like an incomplete answer. Got it? Again, you can divide 10 seconds, 18 seconds, 18 seconds. Yeah, 18 can go on to 19. Okay. So when we get to the task, it will be something like this. You will now listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, give yourself 20 seconds to prepare your response. Then record yourself speaking for 60 seconds. Instructions, you know, you don't have to focus on the instruction. You know it is task number 4. So it will be a lecture. What are you going to do when this is coming up? Manya? What are you going to do when the directions are being read out to you? Yes, Manya, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
What are you going to do when the directions are being read out?
Ma'am, we can write down a template or note it down.
You're going to write down your template, or you're going to write down your notes taking structure?
Yes,
format for taking notes. So when you talk about task 4, what do you know about task 4? You're going to have a topic. Explanation of the topic or definition, maybe something, whatever comes up. Yeah. Then point number 1, example 1 or explanation, has whatever details come in. Details can have example or explanation. Then point number 2, detail. So when the lecture is coming up, you know exactly where to put in. So when you are going back to your notes, you know this was point number 1, this was point number 2. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's see. So everyone ready for the track? Okay, just a moment. I don't remember if I've shared the sound. Just give me a second. I think we are good to go. Okay, everyone ready with your pencil and paper? Headphones on?
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between 2 products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between 2 products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between 2 identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of 2 major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features, all those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay, I hope you've been able to get the points down. Chinmay, did you get the points?
Yes, ma'am.
Missed out on some?
Ma'am, the choice between the consumer chooses the products with higher quality, and they decide higher quality based on reliability and features. And then reliability is defined like the works the way it should work, and absence of defect and problems. And then it is
Okay, you can stop there. Let's see, Manya, what points do you have after that? You can just read out just what you have written, even if it is just words.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have written the same thing about two factors, reliability and features.
Yeah.
I've also written the examples in reliability of cars that if they would need repairs, it's not reliable, and reliability is work up to their expectation.
So have you written all that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good.
And for features, it's also, I've written the example that it's for the cars that they include features like electric windows and sunroof, so that it makes it cool and easy for the person to decide.
Easy to use.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Anything after that?
No, ma'am.
No. So, Tanush, have you got your points down?
Yes, ma'am.
So, anything else you got down, or just these?
Just these, ma'am. The reliability part and the features.
Okay. So,
Listen to.
So, when you got down your points, here we had the topic about reliability. Should mostly be reliable. Then example, now we won't have example 1, example 2. We could have concept 1, concept 2, right? So maybe the details were about the two factors, reliability, features. Examples of reliability, examples of features, right? So now when we come to the question was read out to you, and the question would be written also. It will come on the screen when you are going to answer. So the question would be, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality, right? And how their role in consumer decision making has changed. So how do you think you would go about this particular answer? Anybody? Just give me an outline, not the exact answer, just the points that you would include. And what would your focus be on? So when you would be summarizing the points, giving the two factors and what they are, right? And then it goes on to say how their role in consumer decision making has changed. So this is what they want you to focus on, how it has changed. So how the reliability is no more the deciding factor. What is the deciding factor?
Features.
Features. And you give details of the features, right? So keeping the question in mind, remember you get 20 seconds to prepare actually. We'll take a little more time, but your response will be 60 seconds. Right? So now we get back to how to answer. We remember our template. Okay. So using your template, what do you go on to? The structure of your answer. introduce the topic, elaborate on the topic, give the two factors, details about the first factor, details about the second factor, with why that is more important. Right? So do you want to have the template in front of you? Just to help you through. So just formulate your answer in your mind. Who wants to answer? Akshita, can you give it a try?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a second. Give me a second. Yes, you may begin.
This lecture is about factors which influence consumers' decisions while buying products of identical costs. The professor uses two examples to demonstrate the factors influencing this. In the first example, he talks about reliability. He describes that reliability is whether the product works according to our expectations. For example, if a car does not work properly, it is considered to be unreliable, which means that it is not working according to the desired expectations. Secondly, he mentions features. Features aren't necessary, but they make the use of the product comfortable. For example, cars nowadays have a lot of features which make the use of the car more cool and easier. For example, sunroof or electric windows.
Okay. So you took about 2 seconds more. That's okay. Now tell me, Akshita, did you answer the question properly?
Sorry, ma'am?
Did you answer the question properly?
Ma'am, I'm not so sure.
What was the question about?
It was about the factors which influence other consumer decisions.
So the question was, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors. That was one part. How their role in consumer decision making has changed. So that how it has changed was missing.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So yes, you should have answered the question completely. So if that goes missing, then there's a little bit of a problem. Otherwise, you had your points. Another thing you have to remember, always for any lecture, the lecturer was a male or female.
Yes, ma'am.
Accordingly, use he or she.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, remember, don't make a mistake. Okay, let's see who can. Okay, Tanush.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you give this a try?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, begin now.
So in the lecturer explains about two major factors that play in customer decision making by giving two examples. So in this lecture, the second point that she laid out was that manufacturing standards have increased by time, and now that reliability is not the only factor that plays a major role in the consumer decision making. The another major factor that plays a big role in the consumer decision making is the features, extra features that may or may not be useful can be added so that they can be added.
Okay, you may stop.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you were a little not sure about how to proceed. Now, did you begin properly, Tanush? Did you answer the question? Did you answer both parts of the question? The question is right there in front of you. The question was about explain the two major factors. Did you explain both the factors before you moved on to the second factor?
No.
No, right? So you began with the professor explains consumer decision making, etc., with examples, and then you moved directly to the second factor. Whereas the question asked you to, the question will always be summarize the, so your task will be first to summarize the lecture. So summarize both the points and then move on to say how it has changed, right? So the two factors that affect consumer decision making are reliability and features, right? And then you can say earlier, the reliability was more important. Why? And then you go into a contrast. However, consumer decision making has changed over the years, and the features have become more important. And how? You can give your examples after that, right?
Yes.
So, anybody else wants to try this one? I want to see whether you got your own points or not. Nihit?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay, go on.
Okay. The lecture is about product quality and the two factors of product quality which affect consumer decision making. There are about two major factors of product quality. The first one is reliability. She describes the absence of defects which are not expected.
Just frame sentences out of the points that you have put down. Yes, Nihit, your time is getting over. Okay, that's 1 minute up. So, Nihit, just first tell me, okay, just read out what you have written.
Yeah,
just what you have written.
Product quality.
Don't add anything to it.
Yeah, product quality, two factors and how they affect consumer decision making. Absence of defects which are not expected, standards high, not deciding factors, reliability equal, needed for extra features, easier, example car, electronic windows, sunroofs, etc.
Okay, so you had your points, right? Now can you just frame sentences using those keywords?
Okay, the lecture is about product quality and the two factors affecting the consumer decision making. The lecturer explains about the absence of defects which are not expected, thus makes it more reliable. The standard, while reliability is an important factor, the standards of reliability are very high. Hence, it's not one of the deciding factors. Since reliability is equal, we need another. Therefore, we need another factor to decide. Decide about product quality. which one of them is features, where
okay, now get back to the question.
yeah.
How would you frame your answer according to the question?
So
so you would say reliability is an important factor, but now the lecturer says that the cars nowadays or the products nowadays are more or less reliable. Yeah, they are of high standards. So reliability is no more a deciding factor. Instead, features are the deciding factor. Right? So we are talking about how consumer decision making has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reliability is no more a deciding factor, whereas features, and then you go on to giving examples of the features that you have written down. Okay.
Yeah.
So Yaksh, do you think you have a better answer framework?
Ma'am, I have almost the same one.
Almost the same? Okay, so in this question, what is your learning? That is, in your answer framing, when you're framing an answer, what are the things that you have to keep in mind?
The major factors, which are reliability and features, and what is reliability and what is feature, and why people nowadays choose feature above reliability.
So these are the points that should be there, and expansion with the help of examples that the professor has given, right? Remember, you have to answer the question completely, right? And important points should be there. So Nidhini, did you have your important points?
Yeah, ma'am.
When you framed your answer?
Yeah, ma'am, but I think I missed few examples in the features part. Like I was just able to get one that is electric windows in it.
That's okay. You can say the professor gives the example of electric window. One of the examples. If you think that the professor had given 3 examples and you missed out the others, you got only one, then you can say one of the examples the professor gave was.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't show that you have forgotten, but you choose to mention only one. Okay, so this was our first question. We can move on to another question. Everyone ready? So if we just recap the lecture that we had, the answer would contain these points. If 2 different versions of a product was there, then had the same cost, buyers will look at quality. Quality helps them to decide to buy a brand, to which brand to buy, yeah? Then consumers try to figure out an item's quality. They look at reliability and features. Reliable product does what it is expected to do. The example was doesn't break quickly. Features are extra things with the product in the product that make it more fun or easier to use. Then according to the professor, buyers used to look at reliability as a main factor of buying decision. Then you go on to the modern trends. However, this is important. Your transition words should be clear, right? We want a contrast. So, however, would be important here. The student said teacher. So the lecturer gives cars as an example. Yes, it is a lecturer, so you can use teacher also. The car makers all have to meet the same. So this is what it is doing. It is first explaining the factors, right? And then goes on to examples for the contrast. Car makers all have to meet same standards. Yeah. Instead, buyers focus on features. And then in cars, the teacher points out common features like air conditioning or sunroofs. These things influence buyers most nowadays. So the nowadays has come in. It shows that the student has understood the question, right? So these days, sellers give their products lots of extra features, right? So these are the points that should have been there. First, summarizing the lecture, what are the factors? Next, explaining what decides the consumer behavior nowadays. Okay. Now this you can formulate your answer, record yourself for practice and send it to me. Now we come to another question of task number 4. What are we going to expect? We expect another lecture on, now it says, now you will listen to a part of a lecture from a literature class. Anyone likes literature here?
I do.
Great. Okay. So then your instructions, while instructions go on, you know the format will be more or less similar. So everyone ready for the lecture?
Now listen to part of a lecture in a literature class.
In the 8th century BC, a legendary author named Homer wrote 2 epic poems. You probably know them already, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fascinating poems, really, partly because they give us such a clear window to the culture of the time. But what culture or what period of Greek history was Homer describing? His own era or an earlier one? It's an interesting question, but it's very likely there's no real answer. You see, Homer was working in the oral tradition. Before he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey down, poems were told and retold by generations of storytellers. Each generation added details to the poems, so it's likely that these poems are actually this. They're an interesting mixture of historical details about a bunch of different time periods. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one. Homer describes helmets made out of boar tusks. Well, just these kinds of helmets have actually been discovered in sites dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE in Greece. They weren't used in later time periods. That's a pretty clear indication, right? So clearly Homer's poems preserved some authentic details about the distant past, and some would argue that's the era Homer intended to write about. But then we take a look at another detail and it's a bit more nebulous. Homer describes chariots, horse-drawn wagons carrying warriors into battle. He describes them as simply carrying troops on and off the battlefield. That might be how chariots were used in Homer's time, sure, but in earlier history, the time when those helmets might have been used, say, they were used in battles themselves. The chariots, that is. So this is a good example of Homer adding details from his own world into the poems.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain why the professor thinks there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described. Now,
so this is your question. Using points and examples from the talk, explain why the professor thinks there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described. Yeah. So did you all get your points down? Yes, Celeb? Celeb, since we can't hear you now, you will record yourself and send me your recordings. Okay? Make sure you do that. Okay, so now who will give me the first point that came in? So now what do we keep in mind when we are framing the answer? That there is no, the professor thinks that there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described, right? So you will be using the 2 examples. Okay. So what was the topic? Who will give me the topic? Hmm? No one wants to volunteer? Who wants to volunteer to give me the topic? Ayan?
Yes, ma'am. The topic is the poetry in 8th century, poet by Homer, which time period is he from? Like,
So, what are the points you wrote?
ma'am, I've written.
Or did you exactly write down?
Ma'am, I've written 8th century BC, Homer, culture, what period, answer, oral tradition, and each generation added detail.
Okay.
For the topic
and anything you remember which you can add to it now?
No, ma'am, actually, I didn't understand. I measured out a lot of points during
It
the.
doesn't matter as long as you got your main points.
Yes, ma'am. So, I don't.
So whether now the question was raised in the beginning also, whether Homer wrote about his own period or earlier period.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Right? The culture and the period, own period or early period. Okay. Yaksh, can you give me the second point? Just what you have written after the introduction.
Means I have written rightly the examples.
Yeah. Next he comes to the examples.
First was the helmets made of boar tusks. So they personified the past.
Not personified. What do you mean by personified?
No, not personified. Means they depicted the past.
Yeah. They pointed towards the past. Why? Any reason?
Yes, because in the time of around of the Stone Age, people used this type of helmets.
Did he mention Stone Age?
Means around that time.
Don't put in your own facts. He mentioned, if I tell you, 2nd century BC in Greece. Right? Helmets were used in 2nd century BC. Boar tusk helmets used 2nd century BC, not later. Right? So we don't know whether he intended to write of a previous period or a later period. Right? Okay. Nihit, can you give me the second point? Second example.
Actually, I couldn't follow the entire passage. I haven't written a single point.
You written only one point?
No, I couldn't even follow the entire text.
You have to get used to following the text.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? One thing, like I told everyone, listening and taking down notes strategy. Listen to just about anything. Say TED Talks or any, you can open a search for anything on Google. Play it, write down notes. So the speed in writing down notes is important. You don't need to take down full sentences, just random words. Keywords should be there. Now, once you've taken down the keywords, you will remember what was said. So do you remember anything about the second point from your memory?
No. I only remember the word chariots.
Okay.
Yeah.
You remember chariots.
Yeah.
Now try to go back to your memory and think what was said about the chariots.
There was something mentioned about helmets. I've written that, but I don't know about the context.
So, okay, you don't know about the context. Let's see who remembers the chariots. Akshita, do you remember what was said about the chariots? What have you written down?
Yes, ma'am. It is specified that the chariots were only used to drop and pick people from the battlefield, but during the times of the helmets from boar tusks, the chariots were used in the war itself.
Okay. Good. So you've got the point. So Nidini, how did the lecturer conclude?
Ma'am, my Wi-Fi kept lagging. I wasn't able to hear the audio properly.
We didn't hear the audio properly?
No.
So did you get any points down?
Not really, ma'am.
So did you get your points down now while we were discussing?
Ma'am, I just joined again while you were discussing.
Okay. Varshini, did you get all your points down?
Most of them, ma'am.
Most of them. So are they enough to answer the question?
I think it would be enough.
So while you, now the point of getting the points down while you are listening is that you don't get down everything. You don't get down all details, but the main points. And while you are thinking about the answer that you are going to give, that is formulating your answer, maybe whatever else comes to your mind, you write down. So something will remain in your memory. You won't be blank. Right? Ayan, did you get the last point?
Ma'am, the conclusion, like why, how did
The chariot point, did you get the point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so we can try to formulate your answer then.
Ma'am, the entire answer.
You can try.
Okay, ma'am. So
yes, go on.
Okay. So the lecture is about the time period Homer is from. He says that the lecturer says that it's not really possible to conclude which time period Homer is from, as he explains it by giving two examples. Firstly, Homer mentions about the helmets made of boar tusks, which were used in 2nd century BC and not afterwards. So people believe that Homer was from that time. But secondly, he also mentions that about chariots which were used to get people on and off battlefields. But from the time where the boar tusks were used, the chariots were used in the battle itself. So this contradicts the time period where Homer is from. So that's why the lecturer says that there is no real answer to which time period Homer is from.
Okay. So you did finish your answer in time. Now, and tell me, was it talking about which time period Homer was from, or which time period he wrote about?
Which time period he wrote about?
Yeah. So there is one little defect in your answer, right? Otherwise, more or less, it was a good try. Okay, anybody else wants to try? Who would give it a try? Somebody, Nidini? Now you must have got the points down as we were discussing. Would you be able to formulate an answer?
No, ma'am.
Not as yet? No?
No.
Okay, let's see. Akshita?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you formulate your answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go on. Just a moment, Akshita. Your voice is cracking. Maybe you can put your video off and speak.
Yes, ma'am. The lecture is about two poems, the Iliad and Odyssey, written by the poet Homer. The professor is talking about whether the professor debates about whether the time period given in the poems are from the Homer's era or from the previous era. However, there is no particular answer for that. There are two reasons for this. The professor has pointed this out with two examples. In the first example, he states that there are helmets from boar tusks mentioned in the poem, which were dated previous to the era, which belong to the era which was way before from Homer's era. And in the example 2, he talks about the chariots mentioned in the poems were only used for dropping and picking people from the battlefield, but chariots during the era of the boar-tusk helmets were used to fight the battles. For this reason, there is no particular answer to whether there is a fixed time period that in the fixed time period mentioned in the poem that Homer described.
Okay, now remember your question will be before in front of you, right? So
Yes,
you at least the conclusion should be according to the question. So is it talking about fixed time period?
Why there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described?
Yeah, Homer described. So in your conclusion, if you have to, in this answer, maybe a conclusion would be good to give, and just repeat the question and in your conclusion.
Yes,
right? So not a fixed time period, but what period. So Akshita, I think you had more or less your points, but a few details were missing.
Okay.
Right? Like in the first example, it was in the 2nd century BC in Greece. It would be good to have that point.
Yes, ma'am. I actually missed the writing that point when the lecture was playing.
Yeah. So some important points which bring clarity to the answer would be good, but more or less your response, you can polish up on this a little more. It would get a 3 if it is polished up a little.
Yes,
right? Okay, anybody else wants to try this? Hmm? Who wants to? Yaksh, do you want to try this answer?
I have left out few points.
Doesn't matter, you can still remember from what we have discussed.
Okay, ma'am.
Go on.
So the lecture is about literature, about the artist Homer of 8th century BC, who has had some fascinating work in art.
Art? Are we talking about artist and
literature?
art?
Literature.
We are talking about his poems.
He has worked in oral tradition and has a mixture of historical details in his poems. First example is of he depicts helmets made of boar tusks, which were worn by soldiers in 2nd century BC in Greece.
Yes.
So these poems, they preserve
So what was about the helmets in 2nd century? So the helmets were used in 2nd century BC in Greece. Right?
Yes.
Okay, what was the second point?
Second point was of chariots driven by horses, which was depicted by Homer. So in his time, chariots were driven by horses and were used for the means of travel. But in older times, they were also used in battles. So Homer was adding details from his own world to the past.
Is that the question? What do the two examples depict? That whether he was writing about his own era or a previous era is not very clear. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
So remember I told you, the question will be right there in front of you. You have to answer the question. So at least the conclusion should be clear that, okay, I answered this particular question. So the professor thinks that there is no real answer of which era Homer described in his poems. Yeah, or which period of history Homer described in his poems. Right? So this is this one is a little difficult because you will find a lot of points from the lecture, which you should get down, right? So what you are going to do is go back to the question for homework, listen to the track again, take down your notes. Now you have an idea, right? So now you're going to take down your notes and then answer it again. Record yourself, send it to me. Okay? This is for all of you who have missed out on the points. Nihit, I hope you will be able to do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah? You have to practice taking down notes. So I don't have time to ask each one of you. So just a few I picked up. Now there's another question after this. Remember to, so what do you have to remember? First of all, format for taking down notes, right? Second, template and format for your response. Okay? And remember, you have to answer what question is asked. So in the first question, what was asked? How consumer behavior has changed and the factors. So summarize the factors, then go on to how it has changed with the help of examples given by the professor. Second one, it was about which period Homer was writing and describing in his poems was not clear. 2 examples given. So you have to use 2 examples, which era each example was. First one was of an earlier era. Second one was in Homer, an earlier era, what happened, the Homer's era, what happened, or later era, what happened, and your conclusion, right? And now there is, these 2 we have discussed, so it will be easy for you to do. And there's another question, which is TS5, question number 3. You have it in your study material, in your PDF. The track is available, track number 11. You will listen to this, write your notes, frame your answer, record yourself, send it to me.
Ma'am.
Yes, Nidini?
Sorry to disturb you in between, but how do we send it to you? I didn't attend.
You can send it to me on WhatsApp.
Okay.
Yeah, record and just send it to me on WhatsApp. My WhatsApp number is there in the group. In case you don't have the WhatsApp number, just tell me.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm there on the group. I'll
yeah.
From
So
there.
it's available. So no problem. Right?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
Can you also send this PDF, this PowerPoint?
Okay, I'll try to share it on the group. Right? So you will get all the integrated tasks in this. And you won't be I don't think you'll be able to play it on your mobile. You have to download it and then play it on your device. Okay? Any questions, any doubts so far in the speaking section? So you have to work on the areas which are weak. First thing, practice taking down notes. Right? Listen to any odd lecture, listen to TED Talks, listen to any lecture on anything that you find on the net, take down notes. Remember the strategies of taking down notes? Just a second. So in your PDF that you've got, the 5th section, or if you've got your books, the last part of your books, you've got listening strategies. Go through this, which will help you to figure out how you are going to take down your notes. right? So any lecture you listen to, whether it is in the listening comprehension or in the integrated task, because taking down notes will be important not only in speaking and listening, also in writing. Writing also, you will be listening to a lecture and you have to take down the points corresponding to the reading passage that you will get, right? So don't write entire sentences, just write points. And if you miss something, don't stop. Nihit, if you miss something in the beginning, don't stop. At least the rest of the lecture you've got.
Yeah.
Right? So it shouldn't be that I missed something, so I stop writing. Don't do that. Doesn't matter, you missed a point or something, you've got a few keywords down, at least move on to the rest of it. Okay? And in this PDF also, if you go through it, you've got the templates for all the tasks, the independent task. Okay, the independent task, you've got a whole lot of questions here. I hope you are picking up questions at random from here. Or if you want, you can pick up questions at random from the net also. You will find about 100 more questions on the net. Now, these are the templates for the indicated tasks. Task number 2, templates and explanations. Task number 3, templates are given to you. Yeah. Overall template, if whatever you want to use, is the same that we were discussing in the PPT. Task number 4, templates and examples of the templates. Yeah. And the template that you could use, and your strategies. Right? So now before we move on to the writing tasks, which will be Monday and Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday also we'll have a lecture to complete the writing task. Okay, check your timetable. We have a lecture on Monday, that is Monday is the 12th, Wednesday is 14th. Both days we'll have lectures. Okay, so don't say that I saw the old timetable and I didn't know that Wednesday there was a lecture. And after that, you will be practicing. And on demand, if everyone thinks we need a doubt solving session, but that will come only if after I have received responses from each one of you, right? So after getting responses from each one of you on all the topics, I will also share some extra practice material. And when you register for the Toefl, you will get 2 tests from Toefl, which you will be doing, 2 mock tests, right? So that's it for today. And you have till Monday to send me responses on the speaking tasks, all of them. And I don't want any excuses, right? So anything to ask, any doubts before we wind up? No? So Nihit, what you will do is, you will go through the material. I'll do one thing, I'll share the PPT that we used. This will contain all the integrated speaking tasks. And for the independent speaking tasks, you can go through the study material. You will find the session on the speaking task and the guidelines at the end. Okay. So independent speaking will not be a problem. Independent speaking also, remember you have to use a structure. You can go through the structure, try a few tasks, try a few questions, send it to me, and I will discuss with you then. Okay. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Salab. And Salab, please make it a point to send me your responses.
go for the class on this study.
Okay, thank you, Anushka ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Bye, ma'am.
Bye.